Thanks for having us. As you said, we're with Equity and Transformation. Our guaranteed income pilot program is called the Chicago Future Fund, and that's what we'll be talking about a bit here today during this session. But first, we'll like to start with a short video from one of our participants that'll kind of go into what the program is.
My name is Sharif Pope. I am 27 years old, born on the west side of Chicago. I am a youth service provider and prison abolitionist. I have 5 kids, 2 boys, 3 girls. One is 8, going to be 9. One is 7, going to be 8. One is 4, going to be 5. One is 3, going to be 4. My youngest one is 10 months. I always value being present around my kids. Big shouts out to Chicago Future Fund. They really helped me out. By being incarcerated, I wasn't able to provide as much money as I can by going to work a 9-to-5 job. With the support of each, I am able to take care of my kids. By them being young, I feel like I need to get them as much stuff as I can. Even though it's not much, 500 still was more than enough for me personally. I don't try to buy happiness, but I try to give them something to kind of bring the happiness to them. And that's by toys, food, clothing, household things too. Around Christmas, I said from November to December, that money I use strictly for Christmas, my kids' gift. I don't know, I just felt like I did it all, you know? Just with that, you feel me? I really appreciate this opportunity, and I hope that more and more opportunities can keep coming towards others as well, outside of me.
So, yeah, that was Sharif, one of the participants from our first round of the Chicago Future Fund. Shout out to the Times. They partner with us and help make videos like that for our programs. Now to introduce our panelists that'll be having a conversation with me up here. I'll start at my left. Jaleesa Bonner is one of the original members of the Chicago Future Fund, our first round. She's a passionate advocate for formerly incarcerated individuals. Since coming a part of the organization, she's been hands-on in all the organizing efforts. She's participated in the BOLD initiative, which is an intense organizer training. In her free time, Jaleesa cooks for her family. She's got kids, nieces, and nephews, so she is a provider and care of the community. Next, we have Rachel Pyon. She is the research coordinator for Equity and Transformation. Rachel is passionate about redefining safety and building equitable solutions in the city of Chicago. She has demonstrated a background in the civic and organization industry with experience in research, policy analysis, legislation, and campaigning. Rachel holds a Master's of Public Policy from the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Diversity Studies from the University of Illinois in Urbana Champaign. Rachel. And then there's Ashley Baber. She's an assistant professor of sociology at Augsburg University. She holds a PhD in sociology from Loyola University in Chicago. Her research interests include inequality, poverty mitigation, the gig economy, labor market, regulation, urban governance, and the political economy of cities. Her recent work is published in the London School of Economics blog on the American politics and policy and the academic journals work, Employment and Society, and the Journal of Urban Affairs. So that's Ashley. And I guess I'll introduce myself as well. Maurice Woodard, I'm the operations coordinator here at Equity and Transformation, and just am around in the organization a lot. So our panelists. First, I guess I'll start with a bit of an intro about Equity and Transformation. We are an organization that's founded and led by formerly incarcerated individuals, from our founder to all of our directors. So that is the community we serve directly. As you can see, we are dressed a bit informal up here, and that is intentional. We like to bring that into the space to show that brilliance can be given in any type of attire. It doesn't have to be a suit and tie. So we look to represent our base in that way a lot. And then we'll get started with some questions for the ladies here. First, I'll start with you, Rachel. Can you just give us an overview of the Chicago Future Fund's first couple of rounds?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel. I manage the Chicago Future Fund at Equity and Transformation. And we actually launched the first program in November 2021. We had 30 folks, one of which was Jaleesa, from West Garfield Park. We gave $500 a month to them for 18 months. And since then, we actually had an opportunity to expand the program. We launched our second round in March of this past year. We expanded the program to 100 individuals in West Garfield Park, Englewood, and Austin. So we're really excited to be here and share a little bit more about our program. It really started off as a vision of our executive director, Richard Wallace. I'm sure some of you guys know him. He's amazing. And yeah, he really wanted to he saw that guaranteed income was starting to become a little bit of a buzzword in 2021, especially moving away from the pandemic. And he said, you know, I would really love to do something like this for system-impacted folks. And so even in the space today with over 100 pilots across the country, right now, we are one of the only ones that focus exclusively on formerly incarcerated people.
I'm going to stay with you, Rachel. When you talk about that focus exclusively on formerly incarcerated, can you talk about some of the eligibility requirements for the Future Fund and how we landed on those?
Yeah, absolutely. So the very first and most important criteria that we focus on, like I said, is that they have to be system impacted. And so again, the reason being that in Illinois, there's over 1,100 permanent punishments, which are laws that harm and punish folks with records. And this bleeds into so many different facets of everyday life, ranging from education, employment, access to financial loans, and so on and so forth. And so we know that the communities that we serve are so used to having their records be a reason for exclusion. So we really wanted to flip that script and instead have that record be a requirement for participation. So that was the very first thing that we wanted to make sure is that everybody has a record. The second criteria is that they have to live in West Garfield Park, Englewood, or Austin. We organize in those areas right now as we do lots of other work outside of just this guaranteed income program. But in West Garfield Park specifically, where our initiative was first launched, the population is actually over 95% Black, and their per capita income is less than $12,000 a year, and that was at the time of the launch. And so we know that there is definitely a need there. That was one of our criteria. The third criteria was actually an income threshold of exactly that, $12,000. We actually expanded that to $20,000 for the second round because Austin's per capita income is $20,000. But we wanted to make sure that this money is going towards people who are representative of the communities that we actually serve. And then the last criteria was age. For the first round, we focused on folks who are 18 to 35 years old. That's the age range that's most at risk for unemployment as well as gun violence. And then for the second round, we expanded that age range to 45, knowing that there was an increased need. We recognize that some folks have been just returning after serving decades-long sentences, and that there was a need for support there. So we increased the age range for that round as well.
Thank you for that, Rachel. Next, I'm going to jump to you, Professor Baber. I know you do a lot of the oversee and data collection for the Future Fund. Can you walk us through what that process is like?
Yeah, so we're doing sort of a mixed method approach, to collect the data. So we're doing monthly interviews with the participants where we're asking them questions about, their employment standing, their financial standing, so whether or not they're working a full-time job, a part-time job, what type of work they're doing, how they've accessed that work, so if it's through a temporary help agency, something like that, how many hours a week on average they're working, we're asking about. We're also asking about if they have second jobs, because in the Bureau of Labor Statistics, where we typically get our employment data from, they don't ask about second jobs, and we know that lots of people cobble together multiple forms of employment in order to make ends meet, so we're asking about that to see what folks are doing. Of course, we're asking about what their monthly income looks like from month to month, if they were late on paying any of their bills last month, things like that. We're also asking about self-reported health measures, so how people understand their physical health as well as their mental health. We've actually just recently added some questions around what type of healthcare they use to get a sense of whether or not this community is seeing a primary care physician or using, emergency rooms or immediate clinics, things like that, to access those health services. We're asking them about their interactions with police, so the last time they were either arrested, booked, if they've ever been, convicted of a crime, those types of things, to see how that changes over time. And then we're also asking about time since incarceration and how long they were incarcerated for. And then we're also asking about housing, so trying to measure those like housing insecurity variables. So what type of housing they live in, if they were homeless last year, how long they've lived in that housing, those sorts of things. And then we're also coupling that with in-depth interviews. So at this point, we've sat down with 9 participants and asked questions that, sort of fill in the gaps from those surveys, right? So asking those more detailed questions, really letting the participants share their stories. And so those have gone in a variety of different directions, where folks are talking about the different barriers that they're experiencing with work and things like that. So there's a lot of rich data coming from those in-depth interviews. And so over the course of the program, we're hoping to do 50 at minimum interviews, and then of course some exit interviews at the end as well, so that we can kind of compare over time how that data has changed.
Cool, thank you. Thank you for that detail. I'm gonna stick with you for one more.
Yeah.
While we're talking about the data, we're in the midst of the second round. The first round is complete. Are there any notable findings or any challenges you'd like to speak to?
Yeah, definitely. So from our baseline surveys, so the first surveys when we did the onboarding process, we had folks fill out that initial survey, right? So just to give you sort of a sense of what the population looks like, right? So 61% report that they're unemployed or temporarily laid off. 16% state that they work a full-time job, with another 16% reporting that they have part-time work of some sort. 52% operate with some sort of side hustle, right? And that can vary. It can be, working in the gig economy, or it can be doing things like a handyman, or, doing daycare services, things like that. It varies. We're seeing that this population is definitely housing insecure, with more than half of participants reporting some sort of measure of housing insecurity, such as like moving within the last year or 2 years, but also reporting that they were homeless at least once last year, right? And so sort of letting them define what homeless means for them. So that can be something like living on the street, the typical way that homelessness is defined, but it can also be like couch surfing, right? You're still unhoused, you're still without permanent housing, and so that can create a variety of different issues, right? We're seeing that the median length of incarceration for folks was 2 years, and the median time since incarceration has also been about 2 years, right? And then, in terms of the in-depth interviews, so we're seeing some really interesting things. So in terms of participants' financial health, right? So this is really early, so this should not be taken as conclusive findings, right? But in terms of financial well-being, folks are talking about how they are able to pay bills early now, right? Instead of having to pay them late, right? They can plan. They can put money aside, right? I had several participants talk to me about how they're excited that they can think about saving for a house, right? And now they're learning about what purchasing a house looks like, and they had no idea that there was so many steps in the process to go through that, right? People are talking about saving up for a car, right? Because their car broke down last year, and now they've been struggling to get to and from work, but the $500 a month is enabling them to put money aside to save for that, right? In terms of mental well-being, I'm also seeing that most participants express a general sense of having less stress. One participant in particular, his name's Tony, he said, "I just smile more now," right? So he had been sort of excluded from the labor market because of a medical condition, and was living in a household with a lot of folks in it, and was telling me that he, was having a hard time getting out of bed and really didn't have a lot of motivation, and the $500 a month is giving him motivation to get up and get out there. And now he can't really work in the formal labor market right now, so he's been out in front of his house every day selling food with his aunt, right? So they're cooking burgers and veggie burgers and hot dogs and things like that, and apparently it's quite good, and that they have sort of gained a following in the neighborhood, so much so that when they set up, they get yelled at the next day for not having been there the day before, right? But this theme of the money-giving motivation has been a consistent line throughout, right? So despite the claims that are often made about social services, right, that if we give people money, it's going to create some sort of dependency and discourage work, as has been consistent with guaranteed income program evaluation findings, right? It's the opposite, right? We find that people now can leave dangerous jobs or do the work that they want to do because it's a stopgap, right? It's helping them. Let's see, what else do I have? There's so many interesting things. Sorry, I could go on all day. The other sort of interesting thing, I think, is that, as a researcher, for folks who have done research before, where you're doing in-depth interviews, it's pretty common for respondents to not show up for interviews, right? People get busy. But the reasons why respondents aren't showing up for interviews for this particular study have been really telling about the vulnerability of the communities that they come from and the vulnerable position they're put in as a result of being formerly incarcerated, right? So I have respondents that aren't able to show up because their parole officer hasn't shown up for their meeting, and now they're waiting for them, right? And so their time has been screwed up for the whole day because of that, right? I have a participant who wasn't able to come up because there was a death in the family. I had a participant who wasn't able to show up because he had suffered a gunshot wound a couple months ago, right? So these are very, very vulnerable communities that highlights the need for this guaranteed income, right? And it's really sort of, telling, right, that these are the reasons why participants aren't showing up. In my experience with other interviews, like, people don't even give me a reason why they're not showing up. In other studies, they just don't come, right? So I think those are some of the key things.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Ashley. The data and research is very important in all this. So that was great to hear. Next, I'm gonna jump to you, Jaleesa, who is actually one of our original participants in the Future Fund. So we got the data, and now we're gonna get a little bit of the personal background. So could you, Jaleesa, just tell us about your experience at the start, when you first saw the program, kind of what inspired you to sign up for it, and how that went at the beginning?
My first meeting, knowing that I was around like positive people and people that cared, it was awesome. It have been like a #1 priority in my life. My life has changed, like did a total 360. Knowing like you don't have to go out and do bad things. You don't have to not be able to speak up for yourself and know that there are people that don't care about you. Mm-hmm. So when y'all came into my life, it changed. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do as much as I can for the community. Hopefully one day I can give back. Yeah. I appreciate y'all for everything, and y'all been a big impact on my life.
Thank you, that's great. That was actually my next question was how it impacted your life. So I'm glad to hear that you already went into that. So I'll jump. Why do you think it's important for system-impacted people to be involved in these type of pilots and programs?
I think it's important because like a lot of doors can open up on like someone that was formerly incarcerated like myself, like going to an interview and you know you got the job, but once they do the background check, it's like no. So you feel like you failed your family, you feel like you failed everybody, but you just got to keep going and be strong.
Appreciate that. So I know with these pilots and programs, they're often timed. I think our first one was 18 months. The next one is 12 months. What would a permanent guaranteed income fund do for yourself or the community?
A permanent guaranteed income, I think it would help people financially with bills and food. Definitely if they have children, they can't afford groceries, milk, food, diapers. It'll make a big difference and be very helpful for food, housing, insurance, a safer community, a safer mindset. It doesn't feel safe anymore in my community, so I feel like if it was more help for the people that's in the community, it'll bring us more closer and stop a lot of violence also too.
I feel that. Thank you. I appreciate that honesty. I'm gonna come to you.
I actually have a question for you, Maurice. As we talk about a permanent guaranteed income program, this is actually a part of another campaign that we have called the Big Payback. But I was wondering, Maurice, if you could talk a little bit about the Big Payback and our broader goal to win permanent reparations.
Yeah, so the Big Payback, as Rachel said, it's our campaign to win comprehensive reparations for the war on drugs. What that looks like is 5 pillars being satisfied. We got that from the UN definition. The first one being acknowledgment, acknowledging what they're doing wrong. Restitution, restoring everyone to their whole selves and citizenship's rights, freeing everyone from jail, getting rid of those, 1,100 permanent punishments that stay with you after you've been incarcerated. Rehabilitation, and that's giving survivors of the war on drugs access to health care, to physical therapy or therapists if they may need it. A guarantee of non-repetition, so saying this is what we did through policy and we won't do it again. And then I'll close with compensation and how guaranteed income can satisfy that pillar of reparations, because we believe compensation for the war on drugs and for the survivors should be consistent, should be long-term, and there should be no strings attached. And that's kind of how we framed our guaranteed income pilot, where there are no strings attached to what you can do with the money, because we believe survivors and those that are harmed know what's best for them and they know what they need in their lives, and we shouldn't put these restrictions on how they should be able to spend. So that's kind of at the core of, one, us as an organization. We really are community-led, so it's what does the community want and see fit for them. And we don't think that just in conversation, we think that with your financial beliefs as well, that you know what's best for you and your family, and you should be able to decide that. Sorry, I gotta refine my questions here. I lost myself. Rachel, anything else you want to speak to on the Future Fund or anything I missed there?
I think I just would love to talk about, again, just re-emphasizing why it's so important that we prioritize system-impacted people in this space. You know, all of you guys have pilots of your own or interested in starting another one. But really what we learned, especially through the pandemic, is that our society is only as good off as, you know, the most vulnerable person. And when you look at policy, when you look at, you know, our systems that create society today, formerly incarcerated people are constantly left at the butt end of that, constantly neglected. And so it's really important for us to center system-impacted folks in everything that we do and be purposeful and intentional about lifting them up, not only in these programs, but also like here, like with Jaleesa being on stage, right? That it's not just us talking for them, it's not just us saying like this is what we need to do, but actually bringing system-impacted people into the space, giving them the resources and the power they need to advocate for themselves and to change their lives how they see fit. So I just wanted to add that in and really thank Jaleesa for being a part of this conversation today. One of the things that Jaleesa told me in the past is that, you know, the money is great and all, but really what I really love about the program is the love I feel from EAT. And that's another thing that I feel like is a little bit different about our program in comparison to other pilots across the country. It's not just about the cash. We're trying to really build meaningful relationships here. We're trying to establish connections, be able to give them tools to thrive even outside of just the $500 a month. And our hope is that even once these pilots are over, that we'll be able to maintain and sustain those relationships, continue to build our base, build collective power so that we can get a guaranteed income, a permanent one, funded by the state all over the country too. You know, so that's really our broader goals, is to make sure that we're really fostering those relationships.
Thank you for that, Rachel. You speaking of self-advocacy, you made me think of a question I wanted to bounce back to Jaleesa. Just based on your personal experience in the Chicago Future Fund, how it went for you, what advice would you give to maybe other participants or even other entities and organizations that kind of want to hold a pilot program as such?
I would say with the positivity, the impact that I've seen, it's like, it's always hope. Like, don't give up. Like, you might not have the money to get what you want to get today, but the guaranteed income program will help people that can't get a job, maybe can't feed their family, and it helps a lot. Bills, everything, at least until somebody get on their feet.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Go back to you, Professor. What impacts do you think the Chicago Future Fund will have on the variables we're tracking?
Yeah, I mean, like I started to talk about earlier, I think that the $500 a month is enabling people to save in ways that they haven't been able to before, right? So to think about their future and to plan. I mean, if you don't have enough money to get by month to month, all you can do is think about now, right? And that's another essential thing I'm finding is that people are planning now for their future, right? So I anticipate continuing to find that over the course of the interviews and from the monthly surveys. But then I also think, you know, a lot of the folks that are working in these part-time labor markets are working jobs that are really crappy, right? They're jobs that don't pay enough, that are really degrading, and like we need to do that separate work to make those jobs better too, right? But I think it will enable people to make better decisions about what work will look like for them, right? So maybe now they can spend more time with their kids because they don't have to work the job that puts them on call all the time and has to have them giving up, you know, coming to the PTA meetings or, you know, whatever it is, being involved in their community or their kids' lives, right? So I anticipate it giving these participants more freedoms, right? Freedoms that have really been constrained and specifically constrained for this group, right? So, you know, as Jaleesa said, and as other participants are talking about, you know, there's a lot of barriers in the labor market for formerly incarcerated folks. And jobs will say they're background friendly, and what the participants are telling me is once they look at their background, they're no longer background friendly, right? And so they're being locked out of industries that they want to be in. In particular, like there is a central theme of the folks in Chicago Future Fund wanting to give back in some way. Some folks want to work in nonprofits or the healthcare industry. They want to be counselors. And healthcare is something that you're locked out of if your record isn't sealed or expunged, right? And so, you know, I think some of the work that EAT is doing and the Chicago Future Fund that's doing that makes this program so unique, like Rachel said, and so important, is that there's those additional supports about like being a part of this group as well, right? And these folks are reflecting that that's become really important to them and that they just want to know how they can get involved more, right? And they want to give back now too. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Gonna come to you, Rachel. Just with some of that data that we have been getting back, I know the first round is done. What are some of the lessons you learned from the first round of the program, and then how did the organization kind of implement those to make it different for round two?
Yeah, so first round is over since April of 2023. The evaluation report is on its way. I'll share it with the GICP when it's ready. But one of the things that we really changed, I kind of talked a little bit about that relationship building, right? And so our organizing department, we have Alonzo right here. We have a few people, a few organizers. Really, they're like they hold down the weight of a lot of the work that EAT does. One thing that we've changed in the second round is trying to foster those relationships even more, having the organizing department check in with them, seeing how they're doing, inviting them out to more EAT events instead of just having it be like a separate pilot program. So that was one of the things. Another thing that we did is just in the data itself, Professor Baber mentioned some challenges. One of the challenges we've faced in the first round was that a lot of times folks' phone numbers change, right? And so it's really hard to stay in contact with them. One of the things that we try to do is implement in the monthly surveys, you know, keep updating your contact information in even secondary contacts so that we have some way of reaching you. Those are just some of the things that we've tried to implement along with those eligibility requirements that we've expanded a little bit.
Cool. I think we did want to leave a little time for Q&A. So I'll start here with you, Jaleesa. Are there any other kind of final statements or testimonies you want to leave with the audience about the Future Fund and your experiences?
Yes, I just want to say that the guaranteed income would help like more people, like definitely with the violence and the stuff that's going on in the communities, reaching out to the youth, like more programs for the kids. And, you know, I just appreciate everything from EAT and everybody. I just want to thank everybody for being able to be here today and listen to me.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Rachel?
I feel like I've talked a lot. I don't have a lot of final thoughts. Really just, we need reparations now. Yeah. Follow EAT's big payback campaign, and let's get this done.
Yeah. Maybe if I can just read, so, there's always the question around deservingness, right? And so it's always framed like, is this group deserving of, a direct cash payment? And so that gets internalized by the groups from which, that are receiving the direct cash payment, right? So I'd like to read just a couple of quotes that people put in, the other obligatory other section that you have on a survey where they can kind of give an open-ended response. And it just really reflects how they want people to see their humanity, right? So somebody said, I'm a cool, laid-back guy. Somebody said, humble person, just been in tough situations. Another person said, I love music, my mom and my sisters. I love helping people. Somebody said, Rich, you're the man. Thank you so much for this, right? And another person said, I was in Cook County for 7.5 years, and I got found not guilty of the crime. And that's not the only person, right, that did many, many years behind bars and was found not guilty, right? So again, just really highlighting the vulnerability of this population and why this program is so important and then also impactful.
Cool. Thank you all for that. I appreciate it. Give it up for our panelists here. Do you know what time we're done? I think we have a time for a few questions, if anyone had any. I saw your hand shoot up first.
Hi, I just want to thank you for all the great work that you're doing. And I know Mayor Johnson has been talking about financially supporting formerly incarcerated people, and I was wondering if you've been working with him at all and if you have any thoughts about the prospects for a more permanent program like this.
We've been, I wouldn't say working with, our executive director has been invited to be in conversations. What's big for us, and as I laid out earlier, is this guaranteed income kind of fits into our reparations campaign. We see marijuana has been legalized here in Illinois, right? And it's a billion dollar industry, and most of the time, the people affected by the drug war were locked up for just that. They've been incarcerated, they've had their things taken away. So for us, we see that tax revenue that gets talked about being used for so many things and so many other ways for guaranteed income. If that's not used for the system impacted people that were directly impacted by the policy, we would think that would be an irresponsible use of the funds. So that's what we're pushing for. I think I saw one right here.
Do you guys plan on increasing from 500 to another amount?
I'll let you answer that, Rachel.
So we actually landed on 500 because when we were first planning the very first round of the Chicago Future Fund, there weren't many pilots out there. We had like Seed, Magnolia's Mothers, and then not much else. This was like 2020 when we were just starting to plan stuff. And so 500 was sort of just the model number that most people were using. Ideally, we would say, yeah, more money, absolutely. But this is a privately funded initiative, and I don't know if we're planning on expanding the program after the second round. We really do want to focus on our big payback campaign to get the state to fund something like this for everybody. So as of right now, we don't have plans on even doing another round of the Chicago Future Fund, but we still have people calling us all the time saying, when's the next round? So we'll see how that changes, but as of right now, we don't have any plans.
Somebody in the back.
Yeah, in the way back, I saw a lady. Yeah, I think the lady in the back corner right there. Yep.
My question is, how do you, the sample group of people that you choose, how do you select those? Like the first 500 that you chose, how do you go about selecting those people?
Yeah, I could talk about that. So our organizing department, again, amazing. One of the things that they did for the second round is canvas across all those neighborhoods that we were talking about. We had an application that was just open with like a QR code on flyers that we were passing out everywhere. We hold multiple community events where we promote the Chicago Future Fund as well for applications. And for the second round, we actually partnered with the Women's Justice Institute and Safer Foundation, organizations that work with formerly incarcerated folks, and they also brought people in. So once we had that really big pool of eligible folks, we tried our best to balance by gender, by the 3 neighborhoods that we're talking about, and then those were really the main focus. Initially, we were also looking at like access to bank accounts as well, just talking more logistics. We offer several different forms of disbursement methods. We have prepaid card, direct deposit, Venmo, and PayPal through our partnership with FRGI, Fund for Guaranteed Income. But really, that was all that we were looking for, those 4 criteria that I mentioned, and then trying our best to balance for the other factors.
Oh, I see a lot of hands going.
Yeah, he was first one.
So our first round was 30 folks, and then the second round was 100 people.
Thank you. I think that guy with the glasses back there, he's had his hand up for a little bit. I think we got time for like, what, 2 more questions? We'll see.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your work. I actually do some work with an organization in South Florida that does peer support, specifically for returning citizens. And we've been starting to talk about DCTs because that's part of what I do in my day job. And I'm just really curious as to, this is a smaller org, staff size is like 8. Where would you recommend that they get started in beginning to do this? Because right now they're giving folks elastic, like mutual aid coming right out of the system, trying to resource folks with clothing and food and hygiene, right, to prevent recidivism. Obviously, this is really critical, but it's not sustainable, and it's always a small amount compared to what's really needed. So I'm just curious as to how you would recommend they begin having these conversations, with whom, and how to get started creating a movement for direct cash for their folks at the org.
That is a tough one, I will say, because I think the person best fit to answer that is not here. I can try and answer. I think everything with us starts with the people. So, you know, if you have a base of people behind you that support this, you can take it anywhere. I think our program, as Rachel said, is privately funded. And what that looked like is our executive director going to these foundations and saying, hey, this is our base of people, this is who I represent, and this is what they want. And you keep going, you know, there's not yeses around every corner. I think even for our second round, there were some scares in there where we thought we were gonna have to stop it and then do it again. So it's not all yeses and flowers to get to this point, you know, it just starts with organizing your people, getting an idea of what they want and how they want to go through with it, and then leading and walking with them to that, you know. So that's my answer of it. I don't know if any of you want to add anything, but that, yeah. Over here.
And we just asked that if the question is not mic'd, if you could possibly repeat the question.
Okay, will do.
Thank you. Awesome, completely awesome. Your participants spoke to the fact that a part of the guaranteed income, I guess maybe effect, is the reduction of crime. Yeah. When we were in Atlanta at the Guaranteed Now conference, Dr. Bernice King spoke to that. She spoke to the fact that guaranteed income helps to reduce crime. So I just was wondering if that's one of the metrics or measurables that you all are looking at, and just give us maybe a sneak peek as to what you all are finding as it relates to that particular element.
Yeah, so it's a little early to tell, just because we've done 9 interviews. It's just been 3 months of disbursements at this point. But I think the relationship is indirect, right? So the $500 a month for folks that are supplementing their income with maybe underground economy activity like sex work or drug dealing, things like that. The $500 a month has the potential then to remove the need for that, right? And so I think that, we can anticipate seeing that there's that sort of indirect connection there. But we are asking questions around interactions with police and what policing looks like in their community, and what, their strategies are for engaging with police and what their sort of approach with that is. But I mean, what I'm seeing right now, is sort of an obvious response from folks is that, like, they don't want to have anything to do with the police, right? Like, they are doing their best. They just got out of jail, and they're doing their best to limit interactions with the police, and they hope that the police will stay out of their way as well, right? But we are talking about neighborhoods that are highly targeted, right, and highly policed. So I'm kind of sort of curious what we will see come out of the next, 9 months, 10 months of interviews. Yeah, great question.
Hi, I actually have a question from the live streamed audience. This comes from Marisol Tapia Hopper. How can we access the report and evaluation tools Chicago Future Fund developed in partnership with Ashley?
I think it's not released yet, right?
It's not released yet. So the first round, we actually partnered with Professor Nick Theodore from UIC College of Urban Planning. We're still working on the evaluation report at this time, but I will be sure to send it out to the GICP network, and it'll be on our website as well, eatchicago.org.
Yeah. And yeah, so none of these findings that we're talking about today should be considered conclusive, right? These are all very preliminary, it's very early. But yeah, I mean, as that's released, for sure we'll put together stuff that can be shared, as well as the evaluation materials, so happy to share the questions, survey questions, and interview questions as well.
I think we got time for one more, I think up here.
First off, congratulations, and thank you so much for this critical and important work you're doing. So I'm an elected official. I'm the mayor pro tem of the city of Durham, North Carolina. We're part of the Mayors for Guaranteed Income cohort. We just finished up. Thank you all. We got some of the Jack Dorsey money from Twitter for about 30 U.S. cities. We actually focused on justice involved, brothers and sisters. That was the emphasis of our pilot program initiative, and I've asked for money to be put in our next fiscal year budget to carry it on with actual government money. We're a Dillon's rule state, not a home rule state, so we've got some hurdles to overcome, but we think we're going to get around it. Just two quick questions. One of the things that we committed to was that because it was guaranteed income, that even if a participant ran into some problems and got locked up, the money would continue and be waiting for them because it was guaranteed income. Pleased to say we had zero recidivism with any of our participants in the program. And all to a person, they said this was definitely part of the thing that kept them from doing that creative calculus. Because you do creative calculus when you got to get things done. So one, do y'all plan on continuing, if that should happen, I know you're about 3 months in, will the money continue for participants if they should get locked up again? Oh. And second, cool, all right, cool. Let me go to the second question. Okay. Because that was a question among some folk that you said, no, it's guaranteed, that's what guaranteed means. Yeah. Secondly, the data collection, is program participation contingent upon participating in those interviews, or is it just come?
Completely voluntary. So I will say I am seeing lots of folks who are very willing to show up for interviews. I mean, I did 9 interviews in just 2 weeks of reaching out to folks. I mean, that's like incredible response rate for anybody who's a researcher in here. It's very, very hard to get people to sit down for interviews. But no, it's completely voluntary. So if they don't want to, they don't have to. But I'm seeing that folks are really excited to share their stories. Now the surveys, we are asking that they fill out the surveys. On a monthly basis, but I don't know, Rachel, if you want to speak more to that.
Yeah, I actually want to talk about in the first round, we actually had a participant who was incarcerated for almost the duration of the whole program, and he found a way to take the surveys through his daughter. So he would call his daughter, like with his minutes, and then she would fill out the responses, and then we would be in contact. So we try our best to really work with everybody's situation.
And I think like that really just highlights the commitment that these participants have, not only to, like supporting the guaranteed income, but also the Chicago Future Fund more broadly and EAT more broadly, right? Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you all for having us. Let's give it up for our panelists again. So, I'm not sure who I'm passing the stage on to, but I believe next up there's going to be a Centering Community Voices Building Strategic Campaigns featuring a special music performance from local musician Matt Muse. So get excited for that. And thank you all for having us.